My name is Ava Thompson. I'm 23 years old, and this is the story of how I disappeared from my family so I could finally be seen. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. The stadium was huge. It roared with a sound that felt like it could shake the sky. Thousands of people were packed into the seats, a sea of smiling faces, flashing cameras, and homemade signs that screamed, "We're so proud!" And that's my graduate. Every few seconds, a pocket of the crowd would erupt into cheers as a name was called. I could feel the joy. It was thick in the air, a heavy, warm blanket for everyone but me. I sat in my designated row on the field, my black gown sticking to my skin in the humid Minnesota summer air. My cap felt tight on my head. I kept adjusting the tassel, running my fingers over the silky threads. I tried to focus on the speaker at the podium, a man with a kind face talking about futures and opportunities, but his words were just a dull buzz. My eyes kept darting to one spot in the stands. Section 104, row 22, seats 12, 13, and 14. They were empty. 3 stark, blue plastic seats. An ugly, gaping hole in the middle of a celebration. My seats. The ones I had reserved for my mom, my dad, and my sister Brooke, I had sent them a picture of the tickets weeks ago. I'd called them the night before, my voice buzzing with an excitement I rarely let myself show. "Big day tomorrow," I'd said. "We know, sweetie. We'll be there," Mom had promised. Wouldn't miss it for the world. But the world, it turned out, was very small. It was the size of my sister's latest crisis. I pulled my phone out from the deep pocket of my gown, my hands trembling slightly. Maybe they were just late. Traffic from their suburb could be bad. Maybe they were looking for parking. Maybe they had gone to the wrong entrance. My mind scrambled for excuses, building a flimsy wall against the cold dread that was starting to seep into my bones. I had one new message. It was from Mom. My heart gave a hopeful little jump. Maybe it was a picture of them holding a sign. Maybe it was an "on our way." I opened the text. The message was short. There was no punctuation, just a rush of words typed out in a hurry. "Sorry, Ava. Can't make it. Brooke's upset. You understand." The message was sent 14 minutes ago. 14 minutes before my name was about to be called. 14 minutes before I was supposed to walk across the stage and collect the degree I had worked 4 years to earn. The degree I got with honors. The degree I paid for with a full scholarship and 2 part-time jobs so I wouldn't be a burden. Brooke's upset. It was always the reason. Brooke's upset because her boyfriend didn't text back. Brooke's upset because she failed a test she didn't study for. Brooke's upset because her favorite coffee shop was out of oat milk. Her emotions were family emergencies. They required all hands on deck. My achievements were just quiet facts that could be acknowledged later, or not at all. You understand? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A command. For 23 years, my role in the family had been to understand. I was the strong one, the stable one, the one who didn't need anything. My feelings were an inconvenience. Brooke's were the center of their universe. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sharp. I blinked them back fiercely. I would not cry here. Not in front of all these happy strangers and their proud families. I shoved the phone back into my pocket. The cheap plastic felt cold against my skin. Ava Thompson, summa cum laude. My name echoed through the stadium speakers. A few people in my row clapped politely. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of wood. I fixed a smile on my face. It felt brittle, like a piece of thin glass. I was afraid it would crack and fall off. I walked toward the stage. Each step felt heavy. I saw the faces in the crowd blurring together. I saw fathers holding up their phones to record, mothers wiping away tears. My eyes went back to row 22 one last time. Still empty. Just 3 blue plastic voids where my family should have been. The dean shook my hand. His grip was firm. "Congratulations, Ms. Thompson," he said, his smile genuine. He had no idea. "Thank you," I whispered. The words felt like dust in my mouth. I took the diploma. It was just a leather-bound folder. The actual paper would be mailed later. Still, it felt heavy. It felt like the weight of every late-night studying, every skipped party, every lonely meal eaten in the library. It was the proof of my hard work, and the people I did it all for didn't even bother to show up. As I walked back to my seat, the polite claps of strangers followed me. And in the middle of that roaring stadium, surrounded by thousands of people, I had never felt so completely and utterly alone. A promise formed in my mind. It wasn't loud or angry. It was a quiet, cold, simple thought that settled deep inside me. This was the last time. The last milestone they would miss. The last achievement they would ignore. This would be the last time they forgot me. Growing up, our house had 2 different sets of rules. There were the rules for my sister Brooke, and then there were the rules for me. Brooke's world was soft, padded with excuses and second chances. Mine was built on the hard, unbending expectation that I would be fine on my own. Brooke was the delicate one. That's what Mom always called her. She was a year younger than me, but she seemed to demand the emotional energy of a whole household. When Brooke smiled, Mom would clap her hands together and say, "Oh, she's pure sunshine." When she cried, which was often, Dad would rush to her side, his voice low and soothing. "It's okay, sweet girl. You're just sensitive." Her sensitivity was a shield. It protected her from consequences. When she was 7, she broke Mom's favorite porcelain vase. I watched her do it. She was trying to balance on one foot on the living room couch and knocked it right off the mantelpiece. When Mom came in and saw the shattered pieces, Brooke burst into tears, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Ava pushed me," she wailed. I was stunned into silence. I hadn't been anywhere near her, but my parents rushed to comfort Brooke, shushing her sobs while shooting me a look of deep disappointment. I was told to go to my room. I was the older sister. I should have been more careful. My quiet denial was drowned out by her loud, theatrical tears. That was the day I learned a crucial lesson. In our family, the loudest pain always won. My successes were treated differently. They weren't celebrated. They were explained away as luck. When I won the 3rd grade spelling bee, my dad ruffled my hair and said, "Well, Ava, you always were a good reader. You got lucky with the words." When I made the varsity soccer team as a freshman, my mom's first comment was, "That's nice, honey. Just be careful not to make Brooke feel bad that she didn't make the cut." Brooke's failures, on the other hand, were epic tragedies. They were family projects. When she was failing high school algebra, my parents hired an expensive tutor. They spent hours with her at the kitchen table every night, going over flashcards and practice problems. My dad, who worked long hours as an accountant, would patiently walk her through equations until she finally understood. I was taking AP calculus at the time, teaching myself from a textbook because the teacher at our school wasn't very good. I never asked for help. I knew they were too busy. I got an A. They never asked how. The biggest drama was when Brooke, at 17, wrecked my dad's car. She had taken it without permission to go to a party, gotten drunk, and hit a parked car a block from our house. The police brought her home. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, watching my parents wrap her in a blanket while she sobbed about how scared she was. There was no anger, only relief that she was okay. The family conversation for the next month revolved around Brooke's emotional trauma. Her poor judgment was reframed as a cry for help. My dad had to take a second mortgage on the house to cover the costs. That year, for my 17th birthday, I had asked for a used laptop for school. My parents told me money was tight. "You understand, Ava? We're in a bit of a jam right now." I understood. I always did. I saved up money from my summer job at the local diner and bought one myself. The ultimate test came during my senior year of high school. The acceptance letters for college started arriving. I was a nervous wreck, but I tried not to show it. I knew any anxiety I displayed would be seen as an unnecessary burden. Brooke, a junior, was already spiraling about her own future prospects. One afternoon, a large, official-looking envelope came in the mail. It was from the University of Minnesota. My hands shook as I tore it open. Not only had I been accepted into their top-ranked psychology program, but they were offering me a full academic scholarship, a free ride, room and board, tuition, everything. I felt like I was going to explode with happiness. For a moment, I forgot everything. I forgot about being quiet and low maintenance. I ran into the living room, waving the letter in my hand. I got it. I got a full scholarship. My mom was on the couch, rubbing Brooke's back while she complained about a fight with her friend. They both looked up at me. My mom's smile was thin and tight. Brooke's face was a mask of sullen envy. "That's wonderful, dear," my mom said, her voice lacking any real warmth. She then glanced at Brooke, whose eyes were starting to well up with tears. In a lower voice, she said to me, "Let's not make a huge deal about this right now, okay? You know how stressed Brooke is about her grades. We don't want to make her feel bad." The joy drained out of me, leaving a cold, hollow feeling in its place. My greatest achievement had to be hidden. It had to be whispered, so it wouldn't upset my delicate sister. I was supposed to shrink myself to make her feel bigger, so I did. I stopped talking about the scholarship. I stopped sharing good news. When I won an award for a research paper in my sophomore year of college, I didn't even tell them. When I made the dean's list for the 6th semester in a row, the certificate went straight into a drawer. I learned to celebrate myself, by myself. It was lonely, but it was safer than the sting of their indifference. I kept a small, stubborn flame of hope alive, though. I thought graduation would be different. A university graduation was a big deal, right? It wasn't just a spelling bee or a good grade. It was a tangible public event, a finish line. I thought, foolishly, that this would be the one thing they couldn't downplay or ignore. This would be the day they would finally look at me, just me, and say, "We're proud of you." I never stopped hoping they would notice me, until the day they proved they never would. Graduation day was supposed to be mine. It was the one day I had allowed myself to believe would be about me, not Brooke, not the family's delicate emotional balance, just me, Ava Thompson, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, summa cum laude. It said so right there on the program that I clutched in my hand. It was real. I had done it. I had earned every bit of it. I worked 40 hours a week at a coffee shop and a bookstore to pay for my apartment and my living expenses, refusing to ask my parents for money that I knew was being funneled into Brooke's latest drama, her car repairs, her expensive concert tickets, her therapy sessions for anxieties she never actually tried to manage. I spent my nights in the library, fueled by cheap coffee and a desperate need to prove that I was worth something. Even if I was the only one who seemed to think so, everyone else around me was basking in the glow of their family's pride. My friend Sarah's parents had flown in from California. They were holding a huge, glittery sign with her face on it. My classmate, Mark, was surrounded by a loud, laughing crowd of at least 15 people, siblings, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. They were all wearing shirts that said Mark's Crew. I scanned the crowd again. Section 104, row 22. The 3 empty seats seemed to mock me. They were a physical manifestation of my place in my own family. A blank space, an afterthought. Mom's text message burned in my mind. Brooke's upset. You understand. I tried to imagine the scene at home. Brooke, probably crying in her bedroom because her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Tyler, had looked at another girl's Instagram story. My mom would be sitting on the edge of her bed, stroking her hair, whispering comforting words. My dad would be downstairs, pacing anxiously, trying to figure out a way to fix it. Maybe he'd offer to buy her something, or take her out for ice cream, as if she were still a child. My graduation, a once-in-a-lifetime event, couldn't compete with that. It wasn't a crisis. It was just a success. And in our family, success was quiet and self-sufficient. It didn't need an audience. After the ceremony, the field was flooded with families. They hugged their graduates, handed them bouquets of flowers, and took endless pictures. Sarah's mom enveloped me in a warm, motherly hug. Congratulations, Ava. We are so proud of you. Where are your folks? We'd love to meet them. The lie came easily to my lips. I had been practicing it for years. Oh, they got stuck in some terrible traffic. My dad wasn't feeling well either. They're so bummed they missed it. She gave me a sympathetic look. Oh, what a shame. Well, you have to come out to dinner with us to celebrate. We're not taking no for an answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to borrow her family for a few hours and pretend they were mine, but I couldn't bear their kindness. It was too sharp a contrast to the cold reality of my own situation. It would only make the ache in my chest worse. I can't, I said, forcing another smile. I have to go meet them, but thank you so much. I managed to escape before she could ask more questions. I took a few pictures with friends, my smile feeling like a painful grimace. In every photo, I could see the strain in my eyes. I looked like a ghost at my own party. I walked back to my small, off-campus apartment alone. The city was alive with celebration. Cars honked, and people in graduation gowns filled the sidewalks with their families. I felt invisible, like I was watching the world through a thick pane of glass. My apartment was quiet. The silence was a physical weight. I dropped my keys on the small table by the door and slid out of my gown, letting it fall into a black puddle on the floor. I looked at myself in the cheap hallway mirror. I was just a girl in a simple dress, holding a diploma holder. There was nothing special about me. All the honors, all the hard work. It felt like it had evaporated the moment I saw those empty chairs. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't call anyone. I sat on the floor of my living room, the diploma still in its fancy leather folder on my lap. I didn't open it. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the pictures from the day. There I was, smiling with Sarah, smiling with Mark, smiling with my favorite professor. In every shot, my eyes looked hollow. I looked like I was trying to convince myself that I was happy. I held my finger over the first picture, and a little trash can icon appeared. Delete. I pressed it. Then I did it again, and again. One by one, I erased every photo from the day. I erased the fake smiles, the forced poses, the lonely celebration. I was erasing the evidence of my own humiliation. If my family was going to act like this day never happened, then I would too. As I sat there in the dark, with the blue light of my phone screen illuminating my face, a cruel and simple truth settled over me. It was a thought that had been circling the edges of my mind for years, but now it was clear and sharp. My parents didn't respond to strength. They responded to weakness. They didn't show up for success. They showed up for failure, to get their attention, to be worthy of their time and their worry. I couldn't be the daughter who got a full scholarship and graduated with honors. I would have to be the daughter who wrecked a car, who failed a class, who fell apart over a boy. They would never show up for me unless I broke down like Brooke. And in that moment, sitting alone on my apartment floor, I knew I would rather be forgotten than be broken. I woke up the next morning with the sun streaming through my window. For a split second, I felt the familiar Sunday morning calm, the quiet promise of a day with no classes and no work. Then, the memory of yesterday crashed down on me. The empty seats, the text message, the solitary walk home. The ache in my chest was still there, a dull, heavy stone. But something else was there too, a strange, cold clarity. The tears I had refused to cry yesterday were gone. There was no anger left, no frantic hurt. There was just a decision. It sat in my mind, fully formed, as if it had been waiting there all along. I wasn't going to call them. I wasn't going to scream or demand an apology. A fight would just be another drama, another storm for them to manage. They were good at that. They would apologize, say they'd make it up to me, and then slowly, everything would slide back into the same old pattern. I would be the understanding one, and Brooke would be the one who needed them. Nothing would change. So I chose a different path. I chose silence. I got out of bed and walked to my closet. I pulled out 2 duffel bags, the ones I used for weekend trips. I started packing. My movements were slow and deliberate. I wasn't running away. I was surgically removing myself from a situation that was no longer survivable. I packed my favorite books, the clothes I had bought with my own paychecks, my laptop, my diploma, which I finally took out of its folder and tucked safely between 2 sweaters. I didn't pack the framed photo of my family that sat on my nightstand. I left it behind. My apartment wasn't much, just a small studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom. It had always felt temporary, a place to exist while I worked toward something better. Now, leaving it felt like shedding a skin. I cleaned the small space until it was spotless. I scrubbed the counters, swept the floor, and wiped down the mirror. I wanted to leave behind no trace of myself. When I was done, the place looked sterile and impersonal, like it had the day I moved in. The only thing left was the keys on the kitchen counter and a single piece of paper next to them. I had spent a long time thinking about what to write. I could have filled pages with my anger and my pain. I could have listed every forgotten birthday, every downplayed achievement, every time I was told to be quiet so I wouldn't upset Brooke. But I didn't. They didn't deserve that much of my energy. Instead, I wrote one short sentence in clean, clear script. Thanks for teaching me how to survive without anyone. It was the truth. Their neglect had been a cruel but effective teacher. They had accidentally trained me for this exact moment. They had made me so self-reliant that I no longer needed them at all. I took one last look around the empty apartment. No tears, no regrets, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the feeling of a chapter closing. I carried my bags to my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the one I had bought with my own savings. The engine turned over with a familiar, comforting rumble. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just knew I had to go north, away from the city, away from the university, away from the life where I was a ghost. I drove for 2 hours, watching the Minneapolis skyline shrink in my rearview mirror until it was gone. The landscape flattened out into fields and trees. I felt my shoulders, which had been tight with tension for as long as I could remember, start to relax. I passed a sign that said, "Welcome to Brainerd. Population, 14,395. It seemed as good a place as any. Brainerd was a small town with a quiet main street, a few local diners, and a sense of calm that felt a world away from my life. I found a small second-floor apartment for rent above a hardware store. The rent was cheap. I paid the first month's deposit in cash. The next day, I walked down the street and saw a help wanted sign in the window of a cozy-looking bookstore called the Birchwood Nook. I walked in. An hour later, I had a part-time job, shelving books, running the cash register, breathing in the smell of paper and ink. It was simple. It was quiet. It was perfect. For 3 days, I lived in a bubble of peaceful anonymity. I woke up. I went to work. I bought groceries. I came home to my empty apartment. I read books. I went for long walks by the lake. I felt myself breathing deeply for the first time in years. I felt lighter. My phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts. For 3 days, they didn't notice I was gone. The thought should have hurt, but it didn't. It just confirmed that I had made the right choice. My absence was as unnoticeable as my presence had been. Then, on the evening of the 4th day, as I was sitting on my floor eating a sandwich for dinner, my phone finally rang. The screen lit up with a picture of my mom, My heart started to pound. For a moment, I considered not answering, but I knew I had to. This was the next step. I took a deep breath and swiped to accept the call. Ava? Oh, thank God. Ava, where are you? My mom's voice was a frantic rush of air through the speaker. It was shaking, laced with a panic I hadn't heard since the time Brooke had gotten lost at the mall when she was 6. For a split second, a bitter, childish part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. So, they had finally noticed the empty space where I was supposed to be. I didn't say anything. I just listened to her breathe, her panic filling the silence. Ava, please say something, she begged. Your landlord called. He said you left your keys. We went to your apartment and everything is gone. You didn't tell anyone. We've been worried sick. I almost laughed. The sound caught in my throat, a dry, humorless bark. Worried sick. It was a funny choice of words. It had taken them 4 days to realize I had vanished. 4 days for their comfortable world to be disturbed by my absence. Brooke's bad mood had registered as a crisis in 14 minutes, but it took them 96 hours to worry about me. I decided to use my voice. I kept it low and steady, completely devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. Were you this worried on Saturday? The question hung in the air between us. On the other end of the line, there was a sudden, sharp silence. I could hear her processing the question, the defensiveness rising. I had thrown her off script. She was prepared for a tearful, lost daughter, not one who was holding her accountable. She finally found her voice, but it had lost its frantic edge. Now it was fluttering, uncertain. Sweetheart, we already told you. Brooke had a terrible panic attack. Her boyfriend, Tyler, he broke up with her. It was a whole thing. She was a complete mess. We had to be there for her. Her words painted a picture I knew all too well. Brooke sobbing on the living room couch. My mom and dad hovering over her, their faces etched with concern. Their entire day, their entire world, revolving around her broken heart. A 22-year-old woman's breakup was a 5-alarm fire. A 23-year-old woman's college graduation was an optional event. The old Ava would have said, I understand. The old Ava would have swallowed her own hurt to make room for Brooke's. But the old Ava was gone. I had left her behind in that empty apartment. You chose to, I said. The words were quiet, but they felt like steel. What? She stammered. You didn't have to be there, I clarified, my voice remaining unnervingly calm. You chose to. You chose her tantrum over my graduation. You've been making that same choice my entire life. There was a muffled sound on the other end, and then a different voice came on the line. My dad's. His tone wasn't panicked or defensive. It was angry. He was trying to take control. Ava, what is the meaning of this? You can't just disappear. Your mother has been a wreck. You're acting like a child. A child? I repeated. The laugh escaped me this time, cold and sharp. A child is someone who needs their parents to show up for them. I learned a long time ago that was never going to happen. I'm not acting like a child. I'm acting like the adult you all trained me to be. The one who handles things on her own. His frustration crackled through the phone. He wasn't used to this. He was used to me being compliant. He was used to me being easy. We said we were sorry, he snapped. It was one day. We didn't think it mattered that much. And there it was, the whole truth of my life, summed up in one careless, dismissive sentence. We didn't think it mattered that much. My achievements didn't matter. My milestones didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. I didn't matter. It wasn't that they were malicious or cruel. It was worse. It was a complete, profound indifference. They hadn't intentionally hurt me. They just hadn't considered me at all. Something inside me clicked shut. A door, locking quietly but firmly. There was nothing more to say. There was no argument I could win, because we weren't even playing the same game. In their eyes, I was unreasonable. In my eyes, I was finally seeing clearly. Without another word, I hung up. I pressed the red button on my screen and ended the call. The silence that followed was different from the peace I had felt for the past few days. This was a new kind of silence. It was the silence of a boundary being drawn. The silence of an argument I refused to have. For once in my life, I didn't explain myself. I didn't justify my feelings. I didn't try to make them understand. I let my silence answer for me. And it was the most powerful thing I had ever said. The days after that final phone call were strange. The silence from my family was no longer a question mark. It was a definitive statement. I had drawn a line, and for the first time they seemed to be respecting it, likely out of shock or anger rather than understanding. A part of me expected them to show up at my new apartment in Brainerd, to create a scene, to demand I come home. But they didn't. The quiet held. My life settled into a simple, predictable rhythm. Wake up, walk to the bookstore. Spend 8 hours surrounded by the comforting, musty scent of old paper and ink. My job at the Birchwood Nook was my sanctuary. I organized shelves, recommended novels to quiet customers, and drank lukewarm tea from a chipped mug. It was peaceful. It was anonymous. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for a text message, wasn't bracing for a phone call about Brooke's latest emergency. I was just living. But in the quiet moments, after I'd locked up the store and walked home under the dim streetlights, the loneliness would sometimes creep in. It was a different kind of loneliness than I'd felt in Minneapolis. It wasn't the ache of being ignored by people who were supposed to love me. It was the simple, clean loneliness of being in a new place where no one knew my name. Some nights, I would lie in bed and wonder if I had made a mistake. Had I been too harsh? Had I overreacted? The years of conditioning, of being the understanding one, were a hard habit to break. I had to constantly remind myself of the empty seats, of the casual, crushing dismissal in my father's voice. We didn't think it mattered that much. That sentence was my anchor. It kept me from drifting back to them. About 2 weeks into my new life, a man started coming into the store every afternoon. He was elderly, probably in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and bright, intelligent eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses. He always wore a tweed jacket, even as the weather warmed, and he walked with a slight, scholarly stoop. He would browse the psychology and history sections for an hour, pick one book, pay for it with a polite nod, and leave. One rainy Tuesday, the store was empty, except for the two of us. I was at the front counter, trying to mentally calculate if my paycheck would stretch to cover both my rent and a new set of tires for my car. "Excuse me," a soft voice said. I looked up. It was the man in the tweed jacket. He was holding a copy of a dense academic journal, not a book. "I believe you are Ava Thompson," he said. It wasn't a question. My blood ran cold. My first thought was that my parents had hired him. A private investigator? My fragile peace was about to be shattered. I felt my defenses go up, my posture stiffening. "Who's asking?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He gave a gentle, understanding smile, as if he sensed my fear. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to startle you. My name is Arthur Jensen." He extended a hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "I'm a retired professor from the University of Minnesota. I still receive the alumni publications." My mind was racing. Why would a retired professor be looking for me in a small-town bookstore 2 hours from the city? They published a small piece in the honors bulletin about the top graduates from each department. He continued, his eyes kind. "There was a photo, but it wasn't your grade point average that caught my attention. It was the title of your honors thesis." I stared at him, bewildered. My thesis? I had poured my soul into it, but I assumed no one besides my academic advisor would ever read it. Mr. Jensen's eyes twinkled, as if he knew a secret. "The Invisible Child. Emotional Neglect in Sibling-Favored Family Structures." A rather powerful title. It stayed with me. He paused, then added, "I also found a recording of the departmental award ceremony online. I remember your speech. The one you gave when you accepted the departmental honors." My speech. It was just a 5-minute talk in a small auditorium with 50 other psychology students. My parents hadn't come to that either. I had spoken about the children who don't get the attention because they aren't the problem. The ones who learn to be high-achieving because it's the only way to get a sliver of the validation their more difficult siblings receive automatically. I had spoken about myself without ever saying my name. "You spoke for more people than you know," Mr. Jensen said softly, echoing the words from my outline and sending a shiver down my spine. "You put a voice to a very quiet, very specific kind of pain." I didn't know what to say. I felt seen. Utterly, completely seen. This stranger, this man with kind eyes and a tweed jacket, understood my entire life's work, my entire life's struggle, from a title and a 5-minute speech. "I am, as you might guess, also a psychologist," he went on. "Retirement doesn't suit me well. I'm currently working on a book. It's about precisely what you wrote about, the long-term effects of differential parenting on adult children. My research is sound, but my perspective is old. I need a younger voice, a sharper insight. Someone who understands the topic, not just academically, but intuitively." He looked at me directly. "I would like to offer you a position, Ms. Thompson, as my research assistant. It wouldn't pay much, I'm afraid. I'm living on a pension, but the work would be meaningful, and I believe you would have a great deal to contribute." The offer hung in the air of the silent, dusty bookstore. It wasn't a handout. It wasn't pity. It was a professional opportunity based on my mind, my work, and my experience. He wasn't trying to save me. He was recognizing my strength, all the emotion I had been bottling up for weeks. The hurt, the anger, the loneliness, the fear, suddenly surged to the surface. My eyes filled with tears. I hated crying in front of people. It felt like weakness, a performance Brooke would put on. But these tears felt different. They weren't tears of sadness. That night, alone in my small apartment, I finally let myself cry. I cried for the girl who sat alone at her own graduation. I cried for the years of being told to be quiet and understanding. But mostly, I cried with a profound sense of relief. The hot tears washing down my face felt like a release, a cleansing. I wasn't crying because I was hurt. I was crying because, for the first time in my entire life, someone had looked past my quiet exterior and seen the person I was fighting so hard to become. Someone finally saw me. The weeks that followed turned into a warm, productive summer. My life took on a new shape, one defined by purpose instead of pain. 3 days a week, I worked at the Birchwood Nook, the simple, quiet tasks a balm for my soul. The other 4 days, I worked with Mr. Jensen. His house was a short drive from my apartment, a charming old bungalow filled to the brim with books. They weren't just on shelves. They were in neat stacks on the floor, on side tables, on every available surface. The whole house smelled of old paper, lemon furniture polish, and brewing tea. It became my second sanctuary. Our work together was everything I had dreamed of in my psychology classes. We weren't just reading theories. We were dissecting them, challenging them. He would hand me transcripts of interviews he had conducted over the years, and my job was to find the patterns, the hidden threads of emotion that connected them. I would spend hours reading the stories of other invisible children, and with each one I felt less alone. My own experiences, which had once felt like a unique and personal failure, were now data points in a larger, universal human story. The work was profoundly healing. Mr. Jensen was the mentor I never knew I needed. He listened to my ideas with a serious, focused attention that made me feel like a colleague, not a student. He would challenge my assumptions, push me to dig deeper, and praise my insights with a simple, genuine, brilliant point. Ava. He was a stark contrast to my father, whose praise was always nonspecific and dismissive if it came at all. Arthur Jensen saw my mind, and he valued it. One afternoon in late July, as we were outlining a new chapter, he looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "You know, Ava," he said, "this work is excellent, but it's a stepping stone. You have a gift for this. You can't let it stop with being my assistant." I shrugged, a bit uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm not sure what else I would do." "Graduate school," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "A master's degree, then a PhD. You could run your own studies, write your own books. You have the intellect and, more importantly, the empathy for it." The idea was terrifying and thrilling all at once. Graduate school had been a distant, impossible dream. It meant money, recommendations, and a level of self-belief I didn't think I possessed. "I wouldn't know where to start," I confessed. "You start by starting," he said simply. "The deadline for most spring admissions is in October. Let's look at programs." That evening, a fire was lit inside me. With Mr. Jensen's guidance, I started the grueling process of applying. I spent late nights polishing my statement of purpose, pouring my story onto the page in a way that was both personal and academic. I studied for the GRE until my head ached. Mr. Jensen wrote me a letter of recommendation that, he assured me with a wink, was glowing. All the while, my old life felt more and more distant. I had muted the Thompson family group chat months ago, but sometimes out of a morbid curiosity, I would tap on it. The notifications were a constant stream of Brooke-centric drama. Mom. Ugh, Brooke's landlord is being so unfair about her security deposit. She's so stressed. Dad, I'll call him tomorrow and sort it out, sweetie. Don't you worry. Followed by a picture of Brooke getting a pedicure, her face in a pout. Mom, a little something to cheer up my baby girl. It didn't hurt anymore. The raw sting of jealousy and neglect had faded into a kind of detached pity. It was like watching a television show where the characters never grew or changed, stuck in an endless loop of manufactured crises and shallow solutions. They were living in a tiny, self-contained world, and I was no longer a part of it. I would read the messages, feel nothing, and close the app. My silence continued, a vast, unbroken ocean between their world and mine. They never tried to cross it. After that one frantic call, they had retreated back into their comfortable roles, probably telling themselves I was being difficult, and would come around eventually. In early November, I was shelving a new shipment of biographies at the bookstore when my phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made my heart stop. University of Michigan. Decision on your application. My hands trembled as I tapped it open. I read the first sentence 3 times before the words sank in. Dear Ms. Thompson, on behalf of the Admissions Committee for the Department of Psychology, it is my great pleasure to offer you admission to our Master of Science program. We are also pleased to offer you a graduate student research assistantship, which includes a full tuition waiver and a generous monthly stipend. Fully funded. I had done it. On my own. No family connections, no financial help. I had built this. Brick by quiet, determined brick. I sank down onto the small stool behind the counter, the email glowing on my screen, and I felt a surge of pride so pure and so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me. This was my quiet revenge. It wasn't loud or confrontational. It was the simple, undeniable act of building a life they never thought I could, a life they didn't even know existed. I was stacking my successes like stones in a fortress around the emptiness they had left behind, and I was discovering to my own surprise that I was safe inside. I didn't need them to see it. I didn't need them to approve. The fact that I had done it was enough. The next 3 months were a blur of focused work and quiet goodbyes. Mr. Jensen and I worked tirelessly to organize his research and notes, and he helped me prepare for the transition to graduate school. He was more than a mentor. He had become my family, my biggest cheerleader. His belief in me was a steady, unwavering light. Then, one cold February morning, I received a call from his daughter. Mr. Jensen had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The grief was a deep, physical ache. I had lost the one person who had truly seen me for who I was. His funeral was a small, dignified affair. I sat in a pew at the back of the church, listening to people share stories about his kindness, his sharp wit, and his insatiable curiosity. He had changed so many lives, and I was one of them. After the service, a woman with her father's kind eyes approached me. "You must be Ava," she said, her voice warm. "I'm Clara Jensen. My father spoke about you all the time. He said you were the daughter he always wished he'd had." Her words were a gift, a final piece of validation from him that I would treasure forever. Clara, it turned out, was the executive director of a nonprofit organization based in Minneapolis, the Jensen Foundation. Its mission was to provide scholarships and mentorship for gifted undergraduates from low-income or disadvantaged backgrounds, the very students her father had spent his life championing. We met for coffee the following week. She wanted to know about my plans, and I told her about my acceptance to the University of Michigan. She was thrilled for me. "My father would have been so proud," she said, her smile tinged with sadness. "You know, we're currently looking for a new program director, someone to manage our mentorship programs and oversee student outreach. It requires a unique combination of academic insight and real-world empathy." She looked at me thoughtfully. "The position starts in 3 months. I know you have grad school, but would you consider it? Even for a year or two before you go? Your story, your perspective. You are exactly who our students need to see." The offer was a lightning bolt. It was a leadership position, a real career, but it meant moving back to Minneapolis, back to the city that held all my ghosts. The old Ava would have run in the other direction. But I wasn't the old Ava anymore. I had spent nearly a year building a foundation of self-worth that was entirely separate from my family. Returning wasn't a retreat. It was a test. Could I exist in the same city as them and still be my own person? Could I walk into the fire without getting burned? I realized with a jolt of confidence that I could. The opportunity was too meaningful, too perfect a continuation of Mr. Jensen's legacy to let fear hold me back. I accepted the position. 3 months later, I was standing in the grand ballroom of a downtown Minneapolis hotel. The Jensen Foundation was hosting its annual networking gala, a major fundraising event. I wore a simple, elegant dark blue dress I had bought with my first paycheck. I felt powerful. I felt like I belonged. I spent the first hour talking to donors, to board members, to the bright-eyed students our foundation supported. I was in my element, sharing the stories of our work, feeling the palpable energy of a community dedicated to a good cause. As I was finishing a conversation with a wealthy benefactor, I scanned the crowded room and my heart stopped. There they were, across the ballroom, standing near the silent auction tables. My parents, and between them, Brooke. My mother was in a sparkling dress that looked too tight, my father in an ill-fitting suit. Brooke was leaning against him, looking bored and miserable, whining about what I could only guess was networking fatigue. My father's company must have bought a table at the event. Of all the galas in all the cities, they had to be at this one. For a moment, the air left my lungs. My first instinct was to turn and walk away, to hide in the restroom until they were gone. But then I looked down at my name tag. Ava Thompson, Program Director. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was a leader in the organization hosting this event. This was my turf. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep, steadying breath, and began to walk toward them. My mother saw me first. Her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. She nudged my father, who followed her gaze. He whispered my name like he had seen a ghost. Brooke just looked annoyed that their attention had shifted from her. I stopped a few feet in front of them, a calm, polite smile on my face. "Good evening," I said, my voice even and clear. "Ava?" My mother stammered, looking me up and down. She was taking in the professional dress, the confident posture. This was not the broken child she imagined I had become. What are you doing here?" "I work here," I said simply. "I'm the program director for the foundation." My father's jaw was slack. "We thought you dropped out after graduation," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "You just disappeared. We thought the pressure got to be too much for you." Their assumption that without their non-existent support I would have inevitably failed was so absurd, so perfectly them, that I almost laughed. They had written an entire narrative for my life, one in which I was weak and lost. A cautionary tale. I kept my smile in place. It wasn't brittle anymore. It was real. "No," I said calmly, looking each of them in the eye. "I graduated, and then I just stopped reporting to people who never showed up." Just then, Clara Jensen appeared at my side, placing a warm hand on my arm. "Ava, there you are. I was just telling Councilman Miller about the new mentorship initiative you designed." She smiled brightly, then looked at my family. "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. Are these your parents?" The power dynamic in that moment shifted so completely it was almost audible. They were no longer the parents looking down on their disappointing daughter. They were three strangers, standing awkwardly in my professional world, being introduced to my boss. "Yes," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "Clara, I'd like you to meet my mother and father, and my sister, Brooke." Their mumbled, awkward hellos were drowned out by the sound of my own quiet victory. They weren't seeing the ghost they expected. They were seeing a woman they didn't know at all, and they were finally seeing what they had lost. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of surreal calm. My parents and Brooke stayed for another 30 minutes, hovering awkwardly at the edge of the room. I watched them from across the ballroom as I spoke with donors and colleagues. I saw my mother whisper furiously to my father, both of them stealing glances at me. They looked lost, like tourists who had wandered into a private party. Brooke just scrolled on her phone, radiating boredom. They left without saying goodbye. I felt nothing but a quiet sense of finality. I went home that night to my new apartment. It was on the 12th floor of a building that overlooked the city, the same city that had felt so cold and hostile a year ago. It wasn't a large or luxurious place, but it was mine. I had chosen the furniture, hung the pictures on the walls, and filled the shelves with my books. It was a space that I had earned. I was buzzing with a strange, unfamiliar energy. It wasn't the triumphant high of a well-executed revenge. It was something quieter, more profound. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted, a weight I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. Seeing them, seeing their shock and confusion, hadn't filled me with glee. It had simply confirmed what I already knew. We were strangers. The family I had so desperately wanted to be a part of had never really existed. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a text message. It was from my mom. My heart gave a familiar little jump of anxiety before I squashed it. I was in control now. I picked up the phone and read the message. "We're proud of you, Ava. We didn't know you'd done so well." A year ago, those words would have been everything I wanted to hear. I would have cried with relief. I would have thought, finally, they see me. Now reading them, I felt a hollow echo. Their pride wasn't for me, the daughter who studied late into the night, who worked 2 jobs, who grieved alone. Their pride was for the woman in the nice dress with the important-sounding job title. Their pride was for the reflection of success they could now see. It was conditional. It was shallow. It was too late. I started to type a reply. My fingers flew across the screen, composing angry, bitter responses. Proud now? Where was that pride when I was sitting alone in a stadium full of cheering families? I deleted it. Too much anger. It's easy to be proud of me now that I'm successful. You were never proud of the struggle. I deleted it. Too much hurt? Thanks, I deleted it. Too dishonest. I put the phone down and walked over to the sliding glass door that led to my small balcony. I stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights of Minneapolis glittered below me, a sprawling carpet of white and gold. The noise of the traffic was a distant, gentle hum. I thought about my graduation day. I had walked out of that stadium feeling like the smallest, most invisible person in this entire city. I had looked at these same lights and felt nothing but crushing loneliness. I had been waiting for an audience of 3 people to applaud me, and their silence had been deafening. But tonight, standing here, I realized I didn't need their applause anymore. I had spent the last year building my own audience. It was an audience of one, Mr. Jensen, who saw my potential before I did. It was an audience of my new colleagues at the foundation, who respected my work. It was an audience of the students I would now be helping, in whom I saw a reflection of myself. Most importantly, I had become my own audience. I had learned to clap for myself. I had cheered myself on through the lonely nights and the difficult applications. I had celebrated my own victories quietly and privately. My worth wasn't something they could grant or withhold anymore. It was mine. I went back inside and picked up my phone. I knew what I needed to say. It wasn't angry or hurt. It was just the truth. It was the final word, the closing of a door. I typed one last reply. You could have known. You just didn't look. I hit send. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned my phone off and placed it face down on the counter. I walked back to the balcony and looked out at the glittering city. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt solid. I felt present. I felt free. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I was finally, completely, peacefully on my own. For everyone who's ever been overlooked, the scene shifts. Ava is now looking directly into a camera, her expression calm and steady. She's in a warm, well-lit room, perhaps her own living room. The tone is intimate and direct. I look into the camera, my voice calm and steady. If they forgot you when it mattered most, don't wait for them to remember. Don't shrink yourself to fit into the small space they've left for you. Build the life they'll never stop regretting missing. I smile softly. It's a genuine smile, free of bitterness or regret. If you've ever been the strong one who got ignored, the quiet one who got overlooked, hit that like button. And subscribe if you've learned that sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of you building a world they can't touch.